Forget everything you think you know about the golden era of bodybuilding. Today, you're going to hear the story of a brutal athlete, insanely disciplined and tough as nails, who went through struggles most people couldn't even imagine. A name that's been forgotten by many, but left a deep mark on the sport. A true warrior, both on stage and in life. So grab your pre-workout and come with us as we dive into the journey of a man who proved that willpower can be stronger than any trophy. Get ready to feel inspired, surprised, and maybe even rethink what it really means to be a champion. Oh, and quick side note, most people watching our videos still haven't subscribed, so give the channel a shot. Hit that subscribe button. I promise you won't regret it. Roy Callender was born on October 31st, 1944, in Bridgetown, the capital of Barbados. From a young age, it was clear he had something different. While most kids were still figuring out what they liked, Roy was already dominating physical activities with ridiculous ease. His natural talent for sports stood out big time, and it didn't take long before he became a reference point among his peers. As a kid, Roy explored a bunch of different sports. He ran track, played soccer, and even shined in cricket, a huge deal in Barbados. No matter the challenge, he always brought power, speed, and pure determination. But out of everything he tried, it was bodybuilding that truly stole his heart. At just 8 years old, while most kids were still into toys and cartoons, Roy was already obsessed with muscles and how the human body could be shaped. That's when he started looking up to those athletic physiques he saw in magazines and on TV. Even with limited resources, he found creative ways to train and learn how his body worked. That early passion didn't fade, it only grew stronger. What started as curiosity turned into a calling. Roy didn't see lifting as just a hobby. To him, it was a mission. Training became a way to transform, not just physically, but mentally. Discipline and pushing past limits became a core part of who he was. As he got older, Roy made a bold move. He left Barbados and went to England to study law. The plan was to follow a traditional career path, but deep down, the courtroom wasn't where his heart was. The iron called louder. It was in England that Roy started training seriously. Far from home, missing his family, and dealing with culture shock, the gym became his safe space. Lifting weights was more than exercise. It was therapy. It was war. Every rep was a small win against fatigue, fear, and life struggles. Ever had that moment where you realized you were on the wrong path and had to start over? Roy had that courage. He ditched a stable legal career to chase a passion with zero guarantees, but 100% heart. After dropping law for dumbbells and barbells, Roy Callender jumped into amateur bodybuilding with unshakable focus. In 1967, he officially entered the competition circuit and made it crystal clear he wasn't just there for fun. In his very first major show, he won the title of Mr. Southeast Britain, proving he had what it took to go far. That first win was just the beginning. In 1968, he hit an even bigger milestone by winning the prestigious Mr. United Kingdom title. That victory turned heads internationally and cemented his spot as one of the rising stars in British bodybuilding. It was just the start of a legacy that would continue to grow. From 1967 to 1971, Roy competed multiple times in the legendary NABBA Mr. Universe, one of the most respected competitions on the planet. Always in the medium height division, he placed second 3 times. He never took first, but those runner-up spots showed just how consistent and elite he really was. He was right up there with the best in the world. For some, second place might have felt like a defeat, but not for Roy. He saw every show as a lesson. Instead of quitting, he let the results fuel him. After all, being runner-up in the world is still a huge deal, and he knew his time to shine was coming. The bodybuilding world was starting to take serious notice of the name Callender. Over the years, Roy made another bold move. He packed up and headed to Canada. A whole new country, far from his roots and away from the British scene, meant he had to start from scratch. And that's exactly what he did. Once again, he proved his strength by winning the Mr. Canada title, showing the world that his talent knew no borders. After that big win in Canada, Roy decided to step back from competitions. Bodybuilding doesn't just drain you physically, it's mentally demanding too. He felt the need to hit pause, reconnect with himself, and recharge. Even offstage, his name still floated around in conversations among true fans of the sport. Following his meteoric rise in amateur bodybuilding, Roy Callender took a detour and tried something completely different. Between 1974 and 1976, he stepped into the world of professional wrestling. Under the badass nickname Mr. Universe, he started performing in Canadian wrestling rings, blending brute strength with showmanship. It was a phase where sport met spectacle. In this new arena, Roy showed that his discipline and dedication weren't limited to the gym. Wrestling required explosive power, technical skills, and a solid dose of acting, and he delivered all that with ease. His performances wowed the crowd and added a whole new layer to his already impressive career. He wasn't just a bodybuilder, he was a full-on athlete and entertainer. His final match came in a memorable showdown against Keith Hart, brother of Bret Hart from the legendary Hart wrestling family. Facing off with a member of one of wrestling's most respected dynasties was a symbolic way to wrap up that chapter, with the same dignity and respect that had always defined him. But Roy didn't stop there. His commanding presence also caught the attention of the film industry. In 1974, he had a role in the controversial cult movie Sweet Movie, directed by Dusan Makavejev. It was a brief appearance, but enough to mark his debut on the big screen and show just how versatile he was. Later, Roy's image was immortalized in two iconic bodybuilding documentaries: The Comeback, 1980, which followed Arnold Schwarzenegger's return to competition, and Total Rebuild, 1988, also starring Arnold. Roy appeared as himself, sharing the spotlight with some of the biggest names in the sport, and showing the world that he was part of that elite circle. These appearances helped preserve his legacy and reminded fans that bodybuilding isn't just about the stage. It's about the stories behind the muscle. Seeing Roy on screen alongside legends like Arnold is a powerful reminder that he earned his place among the greats of the golden era. Have you ever imagined what it'd be like to see your hero on screen, fighting, acting, or being honored? Roy lived that dream. He brought his power to the ring, to the movies, and straight into the hearts of fans. After 6 years away from competition, most people assumed Roy Callender had left the stage for good. But in 1977, he proved that true champions never walk away from their dreams. They just take time to come back stronger. That year, he reached out to Jimmy Caruso, a well-known trainer and photographer, with one goal: return to the top of the bodybuilding world. Caruso gave him one condition: he had to commit mind, body, and soul. And Roy didn't hesitate. It didn't take long for the Barbados bomber to bring back his jaw-dropping physique and step on stage again with a presence that left crowds speechless. It was like time had stood still, or better yet, like he'd come back even stronger. On September 10th, 1977, Roy made his triumphant return at the Canadian Championships, winning the medium class and taking the overall title. It was a comeback that gave chills to anyone following his journey. But he wasn't done. Just weeks later, he won Mr. International in Columbus and then the IFBB Mr. Universe in Nîmes, France. These wins didn't just mark his return. They shot him back to the top of the global ranks in record time. Jimmy Caruso had been right. If Roy went all in, he'd reclaim the Mr. Universe crown. And that's exactly what he did. In less than 2 months, he pulled off what many thought was impossible after being out of the game for so long. But his peak was still ahead. In 1979, Roy lit up the stage again, winning the prestigious IFBB Pro Universe and the World Pro Championships. These victories put him head-to-head with legends like Albert Beckles, and he beat them fair and square. The bodybuilding elite had no doubts anymore. Roy Callender was back, and better than ever. This comeback wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, and deeply symbolic. Roy proved that giving up was never an option, and that true champions are forged in setbacks and comebacks. His return to the stage inspired a new generation of athletes to never stop believing in their own potential. Have you ever had to start over? Ever had to prove, not to others, but to yourself, that you still had it in you? Roy is living proof that a second chance can be even more powerful than the first. If there's one stage where the greatest bodybuilders of all time leave their mark, it's the Mr. Olympia. And that's where Roy Callender lived some of the most legendary moments of his career. Competing among the best of the best takes more than a world-class physique. It takes guts. And Roy showed, time and again, that he belonged up there with the giants. In 1978, at the age of 38, which is considered pretty old for the sport, Roy made his Olympia debut and shocked the world. He placed second in the heavyweight class and third overall, standing just behind the biggest names of the era. That performance raised eyebrows. How could a newcomer challenge the favorites at the most prestigious event in the world? Simple, hard work. The next year, in 1979, he came back with the same fire and finished in fourth place, holding strong among the top guys in the game. Then in 1980, he competed in one of the most controversial editions ever, the return of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Roy placed seventh, but many questioned the judging that year, especially considering the insane shape he brought to the stage. In 1981, he proved his consistency once again. Roy placed fourth and reminded everyone that his spot among the elite was no fluke. He was a constant threat, a reference of discipline and symmetry. His muscle density, balance, and stage presence wowed both judges and fans alike. Then came 1982, a year that sparked even more debate. While he didn't win officially, many experts, including IFBB co-founder Joe Weider, said Roy should have taken the title. That could have been his crowning moment, but sometimes the respect of the community means more than a trophy. And to many fans, he was the real champ that night. His final Olympia appearance came in 1984 at age 40. Even then, he finished in fifth place, beating guys like Samir Banout, who had won the title just a year before. That moment made one thing crystal clear. Age was never an obstacle for Roy, and his dedication to the sport was on a whole other level. How many times have you been underestimated because of your age, your experience, or just because you weren't the favorite? Roy Callender is living proof that greatness isn't about timing. It's about commitment. His Olympia story isn't just a string of placements. It's the journey of a man who defied the odds and nearly touched bodybuilding's highest crown. If the stage showed Roy Callender's strength, the gym revealed his true power. Roy didn't train like everyone else. His workouts were the stuff of legend, grueling marathons of sweat, pain, and iron will. While most lifters tapped out after 60 or 90 minutes, Roy went far beyond that. He trained for 4 to 6 hours a day. Yeah, you read that right. 6 hours. And it wasn't just for show. He hammered out over 80 sets per session, hitting every muscle from every angle until absolute failure. He believed that muscles really start working when the pain kicks in and you're pushing past what feels possible. That intensity? That's what set him apart. As he used to say, "I never think about the end, only the next set," a motto that summed up his mindset perfectly. One of the most brutal examples? His shoulder routine. It was feared by anyone who dared to try it. He'd do 8 to 10 sets of each movement. Barbell shoulder press, upright rows, front raises, dumbbell laterals, rear laterals, and shrugs. A savage circuit designed to destroy every fiber of the delts. Roy didn't take rest days. He believed in extreme consistency. He could go weeks without a single day off, trusting his endurance and the rhythm his body had adapted to. For him, rest only came when his body literally couldn't take anymore. And even then, it was brief. A lot of people thought his training style was over the top, maybe even reckless. But Roy always answered the same way. Most of the people who criticize my training haven't even tried to follow it for one day. He knew his path wasn't for everyone. It required something rare, a mind forged in discipline and a body built for daily war. That style of training didn't just build a legendary physique, it shaped a whole mindset. Roy was the kind of athlete who believed in sacrifice, sweat, and full-on commitment. There was no room for excuses or shortcuts. His success came from relentless repetition of what worked, day in, day out, without fail. Would you have the guts to train like Roy? To dive headfirst into that level of commitment without knowing when to stop? It might not be the ideal approach for everyone, but one thing's for sure, the world could use more people with that kind of fire. If Roy Callender's training was brutal, his diet was right up there too. To fuel those 6-hour gym sessions, he needed a meal plan that matched the intensity, and he knew it. His diet was built on lean proteins, complex carbs, and healthy fats. There was no room for junk or slip-ups. Every single meal was another brick in the body he was building. But Roy was always real about his journey. He admitted that, early on, he didn't have the kind of nutrition knowledge we take for granted today. With limited resources and not much info out there, a lot of his choices came down to trial and error. Even so, his results were jaw-dropping, which just proves how powerful discipline can be on its own. Over time, he learned to fine-tune his macros and actually listen to his body. He realized that what you eat outside the gym is just as crucial as what you do inside it. High-quality proteins like chicken, lean red meat, eggs, and fish were staples, paired with brown rice, potatoes, oats, vegetables, and nuts. Here's a detail that stands out. During his early years, Roy wasn't using steroids. He built his body the old-school way: heavy lifting, clean eating, and smart rest. Today, when so many beginners rush to shortcuts, that fact speaks volumes about his mindset. Everything came from effort, not from speed. The key to his nutrition was consistency. Roy knew that eating clean for 2 days and slacking off the rest of the week wouldn't cut it. His diet was strict, but to him, it was a form of self-respect. Nutrition wasn't a punishment. It was part of the mission. Eating right was just as important as training hard. It's crazy to think what he could have achieved with the kind of resources and nutrition science we have today. Even with limited tools, he reached a level of excellence that few ever touch. Imagine what he could have done with a full modern team backing him. But maybe it was that very simplicity that shaped the determined, no-excuses Roy we admire today. Have you ever stopped to think how much of your progress comes down to what's on your plate? Roy Callender shows us that real growth doesn't just happen with heavy weights. It comes from the daily discipline of every single choice. In an era marked by inequality and prejudice, Roy Callender stood out not just for his muscles, but for his courage. During the 70s and 80s, bodybuilding was a sport overwhelmingly dominated by white athletes, on stage and in the spotlight. Roy, with his Caribbean roots and dark skin, didn't just step into that scene. He helped change it. Being one of the few black bodybuilders in the spotlight back then was no easy ride. There were invisible barriers, subtle judgments, and a constant pressure to prove his worth beyond just his physique. But Roy never let that define him. He competed with grace, power, and pride, showing the world, every time he stepped on stage, that talent has no color. His wins, like the Mr. Universe title and his standout Olympia performances, carried a weight that went way beyond trophies. Every victory cracked the door open a little wider for future black athletes to dream bigger. He became a quiet, powerful reference point for many who followed. Roy stood for more than just muscle. He was a symbol of resilience, inclusion, and representation. In a sport where visual stereotypes often influenced outcomes, he proved that excellence isn't about color, background, or fitting a mold. It's about effort, talent, and passion. And in that, he was unmatched. Many young athletes, especially black athletes, saw in him a real shot at reaching the top. Roy paved a path that once seemed out of reach. Not with fiery speeches, but with presence, performance, and a quiet dignity that even his rivals respected. He became living proof that you can win, even when the world doesn't expect you to. Even today, Roy Callender's impact can still be felt. Athletes who step on stage with pride in their racial identity carry a silent inheritance from his journey. He carved out space with his own sweat, facing more than just scales and mirrors. He faced social and racial barriers with unshakable resilience. Unlike many athletes who chased the spotlight outside of competition, Roy Callender always kept a low profile when it came to his personal life. Deeply private, he chose to keep his family, relationships, and private affairs out of the public eye. Maybe it's because he always wanted the focus to stay on his work and accomplishments, not his personal business. After officially retiring from competition in 1987, Roy didn't throw some big farewell speech or dramatic announcement. He simply stepped away from the stage and returned to his roots, back to Barbados, the place where it all began. It was time to reconnect with home and reflect on everything he had built over the decades. After some time in the Caribbean, he decided to move back to Canada, this time settling in Montreal, a city that had already been part of his career journey. There, he found a new purpose, helping others become their best selves through bodybuilding and healthy living. Even off the stage, Roy kept shaping not just bodies, but minds. Today, well into his 80s, Roy still works as a personal trainer and consultant at gyms like Gold's Gym. For some, it's hard to believe that a veteran of the golden era is still active behind the scenes. But for those who know his passion, it makes perfect sense. He's always lived for bodybuilding, and that fire still burns bright. Roy's presence in the gym goes way beyond technique. He brings stories, experience, and lessons you can't find in books or on social media. Athletes and clients who train with him receive, without even realizing, pieces of living bodybuilding history. He's a bridge between past and present, between the sweat of epic competitions and the daily grind of modern training. And even though he stays quiet about his personal life, Roy speaks volumes through his actions. His dedication to health, his daily discipline, and his steady presence in the gym all show that he stayed true to the same values that brought him to the top: humility, consistency, and a genuine love for what he does. Ever stop to think about the strength it takes to choose to stay out of the spotlight, even after achieving so much? Roy Callender teaches us that greatness isn't about being celebrated all the time. It's about staying loyal to your values, even when the cameras are gone. Roy may not be the first name that comes to mind when people talk about the golden era of bodybuilding, but his story still echoes among those who really get what it means to build a lasting career. With 5 pro titles and standout performances in 5 Mr. Olympia contests, Roy secured his place among the best in the world through consistency, grit, and a work ethic that commands respect. His official recognition came with a well-deserved induction into the IFBB Hall of Fame, an honor reserved for athletes who left a serious mark on the sport. That award celebrates not just his achievements, but also his role as a symbol of longevity and unwavering dedication. Very few athletes stay competitive at a high level for that long. Roy was one of those rare exceptions who became a benchmark. And still, he's often overlooked in golden era conversations, overshadowed by bigger names like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco Columbu, or Lou Ferrigno. But for those who see past the spotlight, Roy represents something even more powerful: silent resilience. He was the kind of athlete who made his mark not with noise, but with results and by example. Roy Callender's legacy also lives on in the people he inspired: Black athletes, first-time competitors, seasoned bodybuilders, and even today's coaches all see him as a mirror of true effort. His life proves that it is possible to go far by staying true to your values, without bending to what the market wants you to be. On top of all that, Roy's journey is still alive through his role as a coach and mentor. Every day, he shares what he's learned from decades of practice, mistakes, and growth. When you walk into a gym and see him teaching someone with the same fire he had back in the day, you start to understand what legacy really means, passing on what time can't erase. It's easy to remember the champs who shouted the loudest, but it's athletes like Roy who show us the real spirit of the sport. He reminds us that greatness isn't just about trophies. It's about the path you take to earn them. And in Roy's case, that path was built on discipline, humility, and raw determination. Honestly, Roy might be the most underrated bodybuilder in history. While people often name-drop the biggest stars of the golden era, few acknowledge the man who trained like a silent beast, competed like a true champion, and inspired like a battle-tested warrior. But for those who know his story, it's clear Roy never needed loud applause. His legacy speaks for itself. His life is a portrait of someone who bet it all on his passion. He walked away from a traditional career, faced racism, got ignored by the media, but never stopped believing in the power of discipline and honest hard work. He didn't chase shortcuts or seek praise. He chose the hard road and stayed on all the way. Roy showed the world that trophies aren't the only measure of greatness. What truly matters is the impact we leave on people and on the generations that follow. His journey opened doors, shattered racial barriers, inspired athletes, and, more than anything, taught us that the biggest win is staying true to who you are. Even now, in his 80s, he's still going strong. He trains, he teaches, he guides. Not for the title of Mr. Universe, but because the passion never died. He's living proof that bodybuilding is more than just a sport. It's a philosophy, a lifelong commitment to growth. And maybe that's Roy Callender's greatest lesson. It doesn't matter how much the world sees or praises you. What matters is how you transform your reality and the lives around you through your example. He didn't become a legend by being loud, but through the silent strength he carried every step of the way. So, what did you think of Roy Callender's journey? If this story inspired you even a little, go ahead and hit that like button. It lets us know these stories are worth telling. And if you want to be part of a community that celebrates the true giants of bodybuilding, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a new video. If you'd like to support our work even more, consider becoming a channel member. You'll help this project grow and also get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, and exclusive material. Your support makes all the difference. Now tell me in the comments, had you ever heard of Roy before? What impressed you the most about him? Let's talk. I always read what you write, and I love seeing the insights you all bring. Thanks for sticking with us to the end. And remember, great physiques fade, but great stories inspire forever.